Confidence doesn't usually collapse in a single moment of crisis. For most of us, it erodes quietly, in the spaces between the things we are already good at doing. You wake up, you manage the complexity of your life, you meet the expectations of your colleagues and your family. And yet there is a subtle thinning of the internal signal. The feedback loop that once made your achievements feel like fuel has grown faint. It isn't that you've become less capable. If anything, you are more effective than you were a decade ago, but the internal reinforcement, that sharp sense of "I am becoming," has been replaced by a heavier sense of "I am maintaining." And somewhere in that shift, a question surfaces that you never expected to be asking. Is this the plateau? It's a specific kind of anxiety, but not the fear of failure. You've already proven you can succeed. It's the fear of permanent stabilization, the suspicion that the curve has flattened, the novelty has evaporated, and from here on out, life is simply a matter of repeating your current performance at a consistent level until something external changes it. This is the quiet identity erosion of the competent. You are respected, you are reliable, and you are increasingly unsure whether your trajectory still has upward potential. In your 20s and early 30s, confidence was often tied to the speed of your ascent. You were accumulating credentials, recognition, early wins. There was a particular thrill in the pursuit, because every year looked different from the last. But in midlife, a new psychological layer emerges. You haven't been demoted. You haven't lost your skills. But you may find yourself becoming experienced yet overlooked. Younger professionals move with a frantic urgency you no longer possess, and you wonder if their speed is being mistaken for superior value. You are consulted for your expertise, but perhaps you are no longer invited to the rooms where the future is being imagined. This creates a particular kind of comparison fatigue. You aren't jealous of their youth. You are frustrated by the shift in the environment. You feel like you are running a sophisticated operating system in a world that has become obsessed with simpler, faster apps. The natural response is to reach for the old tools. Work harder, find a new approach, force yourself back into a state of high-octane ambition. But these methods often feel hollow, more like performance than reconstruction. And that is because the quieting of your confidence isn't a sign of decline. It's a sign that your old feedback system has reached its expiration date. To understand why confidence feels quieter at this stage, we have to look at where it originally came from. In the first half of adulthood, confidence is almost entirely external. It is momentum-based. You feel capable because you are hitting milestones. The degree, the promotion, the visible recognition. You are gathering evidence of your worth from the world around you, and the world is cooperating by providing new mirrors at regular intervals. But by midlife, those milestones have either been achieved or they've lost their power to surprise you. You've seen the patterns. You know how most of the cycles complete. When the external world stops offering new reflections of your competence, the momentum-based identity begins to starve. Here's what most people don't realize. Confidence doesn't disappear in midlife. It reallocates. The system that once generated it, fast feedback, external milestones, the feeling of accelerating upward, that system no longer produces the same return. And when people notice the return declining, the instinctive conclusion is that something is wrong with them. What's actually happening is more structural than that. The confidence system, appropriate for an earlier life phase, is running inside a life structure it was never designed to sustain. The discomfort you feel is the friction between an outdated internal model and a more complex reality. You are measuring your worth by how fast you are moving, while your actual value has shifted to how well you judge the path. What confidence requires after 40 is different in kind, not just in degree. It depends less on pace, how fast you're moving, how much is new, how visible the progress is, and more on clarity, knowing what you're actually optimizing for, why you're doing it, and whether your daily actions are genuinely aligned with your own standards. That last part is where most of the erosion happens, not in dramatic moments of self-doubt, but in the slow accumulation of days where the connection between what you're doing and what you actually believe in has become less visible. When that connection blurs, confidence loses its source. It doesn't vanish. It just has nowhere to draw from. The habits that rebuild confidence at this stage aren't about generating more momentum. They're about restoring the internal signal. The clear daily awareness that your actions reflect your judgment rather than simply your obligations. The first of those habits is the shift from urgency to clarity. In your earlier years, urgency was a proxy for importance. If you were busy, you were valuable. In midlife, urgency is often a sign of poor prioritization. The most confident people at this stage are those who have realized they no longer need to react to every signal. They have developed pattern recognition, the ability to see a problem developing months away and address it with a single, well-placed conversation. This doesn't feel like visible momentum, so it doesn't produce that old internal hit of confidence, but it operates at a considerably higher level of effectiveness. When you stop measuring your days by the volume of tasks and start measuring them by the quality of your decisions, your internal authority begins to stabilize. You realize you aren't doing less. You are doing things that carry more weight, with less wasted motion. We have to be honest about the constraints that most advice on this subject quietly ignores. You cannot simply reset everything. You have a reputation that took years to establish. You have people who depend on your consistency. You have financial obligations that require a certain level of stability. You have a body that requires more recovery than it once did. Reinvention in midlife cannot resemble the experimentation available to someone with few obligations and low visibility. The stakes are different. A public misstep, an inconsistent pivot, a visible change in direction. These carry a different weight when you've spent decades building credibility. This is why many people choose to endure in silence rather than adjust. The fear isn't failure. It's looking unstable after a long record of being reliable. But habits built on internal standards protect rather than threaten that reputation. When you move from, "I need to prove I'm still relevant," to, "I know precisely what my experience is worth," the quality of your presence changes. It isn't a loud shift. It's a change in frequency, in how you hold yourself in rooms, in decisions, in the way you engage with uncertainty. That shift is perceptible to the people around you, even when it's invisible to you. There's a realization that tends to arrive quietly at this stage, and then settle deeply once it arrives. The confidence you're looking for isn't the version you had before, not because that version is unavailable, but because rebuilding it would require going backward, returning to a system designed for a life phase you've already moved through. What's actually available now is different in structure and considerably more stable in practice. It's an authority-based identity rather than a momentum-based one. Momentum says, "I know where I'm going because I can feel myself moving." Authority says, "I know where I'm going because I've developed the judgment to assess it clearly." Your 40s and 50s are often the first time in your life where decisions are no longer rushed by a desperate need for external validation. You have enough history to know who you are. You have enough remaining time to do something deliberate with that knowledge. And you have a level of pattern recognition, emotional regulation, and long-term orientation that simply wasn't available to you earlier. Not because you've declined in energy, but because these capacities require years of accumulated complexity to develop. The difficulty is that they don't announce themselves the way early achievements did. They don't produce fast internal signal, but they are more reliable, more transferable, and more durable across genuinely complex situations than almost anything speed produces. The identity reset completes when you stop chasing the feeling of confidence and start building the conditions that reinforce your judgment. You stop asking, "Am I still moving fast enough?" and start asking, "Is my judgment becoming more refined?" That's a quieter question. It doesn't produce the same urgency, but it generates something more useful. A steady accumulation of internal evidence that your read on things is trustworthy. The practices that support this aren't elaborate. They are small, consistent habits of self-calibration, regularly reviewing what you are actually trying to achieve, rather than only what is currently urgent. Noticing where your actions have drifted from your own standards, without judgment, and adjusting without drama, directing your attention toward the areas where your specific experience produces the most signal, rather than spreading across everything that demands a response. These aren't productivity habits, they are identity habits. Practices that rebuild the internal feedback loop not around speed and accumulation, but around clarity and judgment. This version of confidence doesn't require external conditions to hold. It doesn't depend on recognition or acceleration or the feeling of new territory. It draws from something quieter and considerably more stable. The plateau you feared isn't the end of the climb. It's the high ground, the first place in your life where you can see the whole landscape clearly enough to move through it with genuine intention, rather than reactive urgency. Midlife confidence isn't recovered, it's redesigned. The person who understands that isn't behind. They are operating with a more accurate model of what confidence is actually for. Not to signal readiness to others, but to sustain clarity within themselves. Authority grows where urgency fades. That's not a consolation, for it's a more precise description of what becomes possible when the noise of acceleration finally settles, and you become quiet enough to hear your own judgment clearly.